Mhm. Good afternoon, YouTube. It's Friday. Yay. Yay, it is Friday. That's so exciting. Right. Let's hit record. Yes. All right. Welcome to Rise and Shine with Morning Moon. My name is Coach Lacey. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Wherever you're finding me, be sure to subscribe and follow. And if you haven't already, anchor into your wellness foundations in the Rise and Shine with Morning Moon group, or you can find the daily foundations checklist on my website, www.laceyjwatson.com. And today it's Friday. Woo, we are finally at the finish line. I'm almost to the end of my week. For most people, you're at the end of your week, and yay, that is a good thing, good feeling to have, especially when weeks are busy and time just keeps on ripping by. And today, here for Friday, we're going to wrap up talking a little bit about identity and knowing your worth and owning your value. This week, I had a couple of moments, and one of those moments was interacting with AI, I'll be honest. Where the theme, I guess, of this week was identity. And not just for me, but interacting with my clients and interacting with my networking circles and socializing with friends. It seems to be there are shifts in identity, and sometimes people don't know their worth. Sometimes people don't know, how to interact with others and treat them what their worth is. And so I've been thinking a lot about value. And I even had I had a few moments this week where I was questioning my own value and how I even, how people perceive me, how I show up in the world, and I've even done a lot of identity work, and I know better, but I even found myself feeling kind of crappy about um, not being fully valued for what I bring to the table, so to speak. And I had a moment where I was second guessing myself, and then I realized, you know what? My worth is not up for debate at all. My value does not it's not determined by with how someone else acts or how they're showing up or what their value, what they think their value of themselves or me or whatever is. And their chaos was impacting, my mental health and wondering where I went wrong and where I could have done better to help the situation. And I realized it wasn't on me. It had nothing to do with me or my value or what, services I was providing or whatever. It's all about how that person interpreted their own value. And um it made me really realize that is part of how we all show up in the world, is how we value ourselves, and then we treat others how we really value ourselves. And I'm sure that some of you out there felt that way before. Have you ever felt like someone's treating you like a Walmart special, and that you're worth more, and maybe you feel misunderstood, or maybe you didn't make yourself clear, and maybe you're, having to sit at tables that don't necessarily align with who you think you are, or what, how you want to be perceived in the world. And deep inside that you are you're a rare breed, and and that you have something to offer, and you just stay quiet, in that moment. And maybe you just don't speak your mind. Maybe you stay in a room that you should have left, or maybe you continue carrying on a conversation that should have ended, or um whatever. Maybe you should have charged more for your services so people took you more seriously, right? Things like that. And I've done things like that. And, I've in the business world, I've grossly undercharged because I was trying to meet people's budgets, and trying to meet where they were placing value on my skill set. And that's where everything went terribly wrong. Because every single time I have tried to shrink myself and um and put a number on the value that I think they think I'm worth, it doesn't work. So and money's a great way to put a number on things. I have learned to value myself and grown into my identity. And I've learned that how we treat ourselves sets the bar for how other people treat us. And, consequently, if we're in business, how we price our offers and how we price our services sets the bar for how people expect us to show up and how they treat us and how they show up, right? And if we're charging lower prices, chances are people aren't going to value what we offer and they're not going to show up fully. And there's going to be a wobble, and we're going to have to walk them through that wobble, and they're not going to value your service. And they go, "Oh, what do you do again?" Or, "Oh, I don't need that," or whatever. And so there's these doubts and questions and wobbles, and someone who values what you have to bring to the table is going to pay 10 times what, you're already, charging. Or I've had business is a great example for value and worth, because I've had clients who have come to me and tried to undercut me and pay me, peanuts. And then I've had people who've paid me the full meal deal and more, and show up and do the work. And so those people really, treat themselves differently. They treat me differently. And we don't teach people how to treat us with our words, right? we we set boundaries with our energy and how we follow through and how we value ourselves. And if we're constantly shrinking and editing and questioning our own worth, people will pick up on that, and they will start to believe the story that we are telling, even if there's no words, even if it's silent, because energy speaks volumes, right? Energy speaks volumes. And that's why identity work matters so much. But we have to remember that our identity isn't just all about us, right? It's not all about us. It's our identity. We did not create ourselves. We did not, create ourselves. So our identity is forged through the one that created us. And then through that, we can accentuate the parts of ourselves that are the, best parts of ourselves, our talents, our joys, our interests. We can accentuate those things to craft an identity, because how we see ourselves shapes how we show up in the world. How do you want to show up in the world? One of my mentors used to ask me that. How do you want to show up in the world? If you believe you're too much, you're going to play small. If you think that you have too much or too much this, too much that, you're going to play small. And if you believe that you don't matter, then you're not going to matter. You're going to quit trying and just quit. Like, who cares? Why bother? Just fuck it all. I'm done. And, if you believe that you're not worthy of success and that you'll just settle for anything, any old thing, even if it just makes you feel something, even if it hurts, then you'll live in the mediocre. But if you believe you matter and you show up with the fire and the intensity and the strength that's in your heart, and speak like you mean it, and show up like you mean it, love like you mean it, work like you mean it, give your heart into everything, show up like you belong. There's a difference in showing up in like you belong and then showing up like you're better than everyone. There's a difference in showing up like you belong and than showing up terrified or like you have a wall up and don't want to talk to anybody. There's these different energies. And I've been in these energies of other people, and I've had these energies myself. There's been many times where I have walked into a room and I felt like small and I didn't belong, and that repelled people. There's been other times where I felt like, I got this and I can I can own the room and I can be friends with anybody and I have a really great time. And then there's other times where I walk into a room and I become a snot and I and it seems like I'm an ego because I either feel insecure, I feel like I know more than someone, or I feel like I'm in the wrong room. But there are lessons to be learned from everyone, and we must match the energy for curiosity and love and and having our value and accentuating our gifts and talents so that other people can benefit from them. Because what point is there to have talent if you're not helping other people, if you're not being of service? There's no real point to anything if you're not serving others. So believe like you matter, speak like you matter, love like you matter. Show up like you care, show up like it matters, like you have just this one life, you know, not because you don't show up in a way like, oh, I'm just better than everybody, but show up like I care about myself, I care about others, I care. And we show up sometimes in anxiety and we show up in fear, and that reverberates and it comes back to us. And then we keep telling ourselves this lie that we're broken and no one will ever love us, and we won't be able to ever have friends, and blah 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 blah, and who am I, and I'm just whatever, and da 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 da. And these are just old belief systems and patterns that we need to interrupt. And if you really trace these belief patterns back, they come from various different places, generational ripple effects, whether they're from our own family lineage or from people we've spent a lot of time with, or whatever. They were handed to us and molded for us and spoken over us in moments of pain and doubt and confusion, or fear, and it takes over sometimes, that darkness, and it makes us forget how valuable we are, especially if we're worried. Like if you're worried or something doesn't work out the way that you want it to. That's very classic. When things don't work out the way we want it to, we tend to have little fits, and we, I don't F you, F that, everything, and so then you're like, well, I'm not valuable, nothing's valuable, and it just begins to spiral. And that's when we really forget to anchor in. And that's when we really need to anchor in, because you can only control your controllables, right? And we can't forget how valuable we are. When did you forget how valuable you are as a person? Because you weren't born to be small, and you weren't born to worry, you know. Babies don't apologize for crying or worry about being too loud or wonder if they're lovable enough. These are conditions that we are created in, and stories we tell ourselves. And so you can choose and make the choice to think differently and reframe your thoughts, not because you're inauthentic, or not because you aren't happy with who you are, but you're allowed to change, right? You're allowed to change and become renewed. And so I want you to reflect on, how do I want to show up in the world? How do I want to show up in the world? And how am I treating myself? And how is it affecting other people? Am I having a bad day? And did I not get what I wanted? And therefore I am now taking it out on myself, and I'm bleeding out all over everyone. And so here we are, we have to clean up this mess. A few of those moments will end up really wreaking havoc on your life, and it's a lot to clean up those big messes. So anchor in, control what you can control your controllables. It's the weekend, go enjoy. You can only control those things like your food, your water, your movement, your entertainment, all of those things. So remember who you are. Remember what you love about yourself, what you love about life, what you love about others, and act accordingly. You know, what would it look like if you walked through life knowing that you had value and treating yourself and others like they matter, you know, not when someone else finally sees your worth, or you know, when you get that money finally. It's really short-sighted to place your value on how much money you have, or how, or what financial status you are in. So anchor in, rise and shine, not just for everyone else, but for yourself, because you matter. And I will see you on Monday. I hope you have the most beautiful weekend and enjoy it. Get outside, get into the sunshine.